Hey guys, so I have a little tutorial for you today. One of my most asked questions on Instagram has got to be, can you please do a wreath tutorial? So I'm just going to have a go at recreating this really fluffy textured wreath today. Okay, so I'm going to pop that there for reference. And you can see here, this is another one I did, that I've kind of broken down the different elements that we're going to use to make this wreath. So they're really full, they're really textured and lovely, but they are made up from just a few simple elements. Just ignore these, this is a different thing. Okay, so here we go. So I'm just using two brushes for this piece, and the first one is a Winsor & Newton Series 7 brush in size 1. And I absolutely love this brush. I use this for about 90% of my watercolour work. It's just the perfect size for me for doing florals and greenery, and it's great. The other brush that I'm going to use is the 000 from the same range, and it's a super fine, tiny little brush, and it's brilliant for adding lots of detail. So, first of all, we're going to go in with a really nice light layer. So what I've got here is some green that I've already prepared, and it is Lettuce Barrow's Nicosia with a tiny bit of yellow just to make it kind of slightly zingier green. So I've been looking at my colours here. I'm one of those artists that will sit for 20 minutes if I don't know what colours I'm doing beforehand. So I have to sit and plan them out. So this is kind of the range that we're going to go for. We've got our greens, light to darks, and we've also got blue for the florals, and we're going to add some little accent buds in yellow. Okay, so this is my green, and I'm going to be using this for really light greenery just to get us going. So I've just drawn a pencil outline to work from, but you really don't need to worry too much about your placement at this point. All I'm doing is just painting little clusters of greenery, and the only thing to keep an eye on is that you have an even kind of spacing between them as you're going round. And if you do this with each layer, it really helps to make the wreath look kind of even and beautifully proportioned once it's finished. I wouldn't say it matters so much for this layer because there's a really light wash that we're going in with, but when you start adding the darker colours, you will notice that your eye's more drawn to them. So that's when you start to think, okay, I need to be careful where I'm putting this electric blue floral. For these guys, I wouldn't worry. So it's totally up to you what kind of shapes you want to be using for your greenery. I always kind of lean towards this soft, pointed cluster. I feel like it's a really easy one to add in, so if you get to the end and you're thinking something looks a bit off there, this one can just slot in, you can add in little pieces and you'll never know. And I'm going for kind of quite big leaves here. This is going to be the base for the fluffiness of the wreath. So we want nice big light washy leaves just to start to give us a base to play with. So I've watered my paint down with quite a lot of water, so it's going to be really lovely and translucent when it dries, and it means that we can work back over it with other colours. Okay. Just adding a few teeny sprigs, just because I don't want it to look too uniform. So I'm just making sure that each cluster kind of has its own little feel and its own vibe, which I think that's fine. And you can see here that my gap is much smaller than these ones around here. I'm not worried about that because this is our first layer, it's a very light layer, but it's something that when we move on to the next layers, I'll be sure to keep that darker section quite even. So I'm just going to add a couple of leaves here just to make sure it doesn't look too different to the other sections. Okay. Cool. So I'm going to leave this now. Some artists will build their whole piece in one go. I'm not one of those artists. I'm all about the layers. So I'm going to leave this and let it dry completely. And that means that when we come back and we're adding in our darker colours and things, we can really work straight over those layers, and that will really help to create the kind of depth and fluffiness that I'm looking for in my wreaths. Okay, so I'll see you shortly. Okay, welcome back guys. This is part 2 of the fluffy wreath tutorial. So this is where we've kind of got up to. We've let our base layer dry. It's nice and light and fluffy. And now we're going to go in for our second layer. I'm just going to move this so that you can see what I'm doing a bit better. There we go. By the way, this is my spray bottle. I use this for moistening all of my watercolours before I start. It sounds ridiculous, but what a game changer. I absolutely love that tiny spray bottle. So there you go. Okay, so I'm going to move to my smaller brush now, just to give me a little bit more definition. I want them to be slightly smaller leaves, a little bit more detailed. And I'm moving on to a slightly darker green as well. So this green is Pistachio by Lettuce Sparrow. And we're going to start to work our way around these open sections, filling in with some smaller greenery. I have to say guys, I've always been an artist that just can't work with pans straight out of the box. I have to mix things, I'm always blending colours, and this Lettuce Sparrow palette is the first that I've ever used that I can just literally pick up and go. I think Kelly is a master at blending colour. They're just beautiful, they are exactly how I would want my colours to look and would spend 10 minutes trying to get that. So I highly recommend checking out her stuff. And you can, hopefully you can see here that because we've let the paint dry, we're not having to worry about starting to go over things, starting to blend the layers into each other. I just find it so much easier than working with wet layers. Some people don't, that's absolutely fine. It's however you want to work. And I think wreaths are quite good at showing you what you enjoy painting, what your style is, because there are so many ways to do these wreaths and it's all up to you. You might surprise yourself by the time you've got to the end. So we're just working our way around, and again, I really wouldn't be too concerned about the layout. All you're doing is filling in gaps with different greenery. It's nice for them to overlap, I think, and that helps to create a really nice full style. But the beauty of wreaths is that you really can just keep going, keep layering, come back to things. There's nothing to stop you getting to the end and adding in more pale layers, whatever you want to do to make it look right. So it's not something you should stress about at all. And we don't want to be stressed when we're painting. This is a happy place. So I tend to paint my stem first. I feel like that's a good base. You've got a clear idea then of where you're going. You can always extend it, add in extra little layers, whatever you want to do. Perfect. So I think probably the next thing I'll do is just add in a few random stems. Just to add a little bit of interest. They can be anywhere. It's nice to kind of extend. So you can see we've got our band of fluffiness here, and adding in an addition, it's going to thicken the wreath, it's going to fill it out as we go. And having that space there, that's going to encourage us to fill out as we go with other florals and things. So just building, we're building all the time. And this is something I quite often do at the very end as well, because if you've got any kind of issues with placement, things looking a bit lopsided, whack a few simple stems on there, you're all good. Okay. So I'm going to move on to our florals now. I'm going to go back to my bigger brush. And I'm looking for a nice kind of soft muted blue. So let's have a little look. This is Mallory by Letter Sparrow. Ooh, yeah. that's perfect. I want this wreath to be quite sort of ethereal and soft in tone, so that's a perfect colour choice for me there. And I'm just going to go straight in with the flowers. I'm not going to worry about adding the stems at this point, although that's what I do first with leaves. With flowers, the bloom is the most important part, so it's the placement of that bloom that you need to worry about. We can come back and add stems in later when we know that that's looking great. And these are just super simple little buds. I'm not worrying too much about the shape. Something that's quite nice to think about though is where your colours are sitting on the wreath. So for instance, if I was going to do just a little bit more of this dark blue, I would go opposite so that it's balanced. If I wanted this to be all over the wreath, I would look for maybe a triangle, maybe a square, so that you've got that proportioned colour throughout the wreath. So for this one I'm just going to go, I think I'm going to go opposite. And you can see again the joy of layering. We can just go straight over that. Okay, so I'm watering down my paint a little bit more now. I'm just going to add in a few more buds just so that the wreath doesn't look too rigid. So it's always really useful to just kind of lean back, maybe look at something else for a second, look back and say, right, is there anywhere that's kind of sparse? So I'm feeling like there's just nothing here. And there doesn't need to be a lot, but I think just a little bit of that colour further down will help to tie the wreath together a little bit more. We can go for one slightly out. Okay, cool. So that's our main florals done. I think I'd quite like to go in with a slightly lighter version. So I'm just gonna, I love having these little pots around. I realise that this is much more of a pain than just having a palette to hand, but I did not have a palette to hand, so there we go. And I'm just gonna mix, what do I want? Really, really muted and soft, so I'm just going to put a little bit of grey in there. And some water. Let's test that. Lovely. This is like a really soft version of this one. I hope that the light's okay, guys. I am losing light, I think. It gets dark so early in England at the moment. Okay, so just going to add in a few buds in this lighter grey. just want some depth. This is going to make the piece feel a lot more interesting and three-dimensional almost, having some more tones in there. And if you ever feel like you're struggling with the shape of the wreath but you don't know what to do, it's best to go for these paler tones, so go for the pale blue or the pale green and just kind of keep extending until you're feeling like, yeah, that's working again as a wreath. Because if you go in with a dark colour and you're not sure, it could end up looking even more obvious than having just left it be. So I'm feeling like this section here looks quite rigid, so I'm just going to go quite far out and add in a couple of buds, and that's just going to thicken that up, bring it round. Lovely, I think that's looking okay. Perfect. And then while we're at it, we're going to do our accent colour. So I'm back on the small brush again. I've chosen a really nice yellow. So it's just going to react with the blue and it's going to pop. It's really going to lift all of those colours. But we only need a really tiny bit. I've actually mixed it with a little bit of brown just so that it doesn't feel too neon. And then these can be as thick or as sporadic as you would like. So I tend to just do small amounts of clusters, and if I feel like I need more, I can just go back over that again. You can always add, you can't remove. As I'm going around with all these florals, I'm always trying to make sure that I've got an even amount on the inside and the outside of the wreath. So they're not kind of all sitting on the edge and they're not all sitting inside. They're loose, scattered. Okay, so sticking with our super fine brush, I just want a nice mid-tone green, and we're just going to add in all of our stems. I would say go for a slightly go for a slightly darker green than you might imagine you'd want, because when they're so fine, the colour won't show up as much. Okay. And I would say as well, I'm not one to worry about, you know, where has that stem come from? Like, surely that flower was attached to that flower, not that one, and whatever, you know? Doesn't matter. Nobody cares. Just paint it where it feels good and go with it. It doesn't have to be accurate. Okay, so once you've added all the stems in, just kind of step back, have a look at it, see if you think anything needs adding in. So I'm feeling like this is a bit skinny here, possibly here as well, and all I'm going to do is just add a leaf and then pull that stem in. That's it. That's just going to keep everything looking nice and fluffy. I'd always suggest maybe going away for 5 minutes, get some fresh eyes on your work, come back and just check if everything's okay. Taking a photo is actually really good as well. So you might be watching me now thinking, you've missed a bit. Sorry if I have. Okay, so that is our fluffy wreath. I'm looking at it now, I'm thinking, does anything else? See, this is quite heavy. I feel like I drew this quite heavy. So I might just go back in with our darker colour and just add a tiny bit more to this side. I don't want the wreath to feel lopsided. Okay guys, so hopefully you will now have a beautiful fluffy wreath, and I hope that you've enjoyed this. I hope it's been helpful for you. I would absolutely love to see if anybody has a go at the tutorial. Please do tag me, Giorgio Draws, and use the new hashtag I'm starting, which is hashtag Giorgio Draws Tutorial. And I can't wait to see what you come up with.